Ever imagine disappearing from the face of the Earth for a whopping 6 months, living in a windowless steel tube where a single flush toilet can literally kill you? This is not some crazy movie plot, but the life of a nuclear submariner. But before we reveal the dark side of what it's like working as one, do give us a sub if you're interested in more videos like these. Endurance test. Let's start with an endurance test every single nuclear submariner needs to encounter sometime in their lives. Back in March 2024, the British nuclear submarine called the Vengeance shattered records by remaining submerged in water for a record-breaking 201 days. This is more than half a year without sunlight, fresh air, or even a sign of life, one might say. To the average person, this sounds like nothing but ultimate death, kind of like what we saw in the Passenger movie when Jennifer Lawrence was freed from her sleep. But to a submariner, this is just the usual patrol and part of their job. This begs the question, what actually happens to the human mind and body when it is removed from the natural world for so long? Firstly, the isolation is absolute. Unlike the International Space Station, which has windows looking down on Earth and other planets, looking to be an absolutely stunning visual, a submarine is basically a black hole. Once you seal the hatch and the boat goes beneath the waves, the crew enters a state of existence that no one has ever gone through in the history of mankind. There's no internet, live news, and no way to even know what's happening in the world above, unless the captain decides to tell you. It sounds like prison, because to some people, it actually is. You could be at sea while a war starts, a new president is elected, or a family member passes away. However, you won't know about it till you hit the dock months later. This level of disconnection isn't something an average human can handle. Interestingly, scientists have found a unique psychological phenomenon often called the gray that these people experience. Days turn into weeks with no sunrise or sunset to mark the passage of time. The clock is the only thing that matters to you, and if that is taken away, then an interesting level of anxiety hits you. You lived in a suspended realm, banished from time and space, carrying out critical missions with nuclear weapons while wearing sneakers and coveralls, completely detached from the civilization that you're actually protecting. The tightness. But here's the thing. If you're claustrophobic, bad news, because a submarine is your worst nightmare. The whole concept of personal space doesn't exist here. If we take a look at an average living quarter, which honestly, we can't even call them that, they are basically berthing areas that are stacked 3 bunks high. These racks are basically aluminum coffins with a curtain, and that's basically all the privacy you get. However, that's also all the privacy you can want in a place that is as mellow as a submarine. However, the dimensions here are brutal too. The beds are usually 6 feet long and 2 feet wide, with just enough headroom to turn over without touching your nose on the metal pan above you. In other words, if you're a muscular giant or a tall guy, a submarine might not be the perfect place for you to see. Sailors usually customize them with pouches for iPads, photos of loved ones taped to the ceiling, and even makeshift blackout curtains. It's your bedroom, living room, and even a snack place sometimes. However, if you're on fast-attack submarines like the Virginia class or Los Angeles class, the conditions are even worse. How? On these submarines, there are often more people than beds. This leads to the practice of something called hot racking. What this means is that you finish your deadly 8-hour shift exhausted and covered in grease. Then, you head to your rack. As you arrive, another sailor wakes up to their shift, they roll out, and you roll in. The sheets are still warm from their body heat, and the air inside the curtain still smells just like them. An average human being would literally never want to be in a place like this. But wait till you hear what's coming next. On some of these boats, there are junior sailors who don't even get a bunk in the bunk room. They sleep in something called the torpedo room. Staying here to get a good night's rest on a temporary cot squeezed between massive Mark 48 ADCAP torpedoes and Tomahawk cruise missiles is just miserable. It brings a whole new meaning to sleeping with your weapons because you're quite literally napping on top of enough high explosives that could melt a city block. Smell. While documentaries do a great job in conveying what it's like being a submariner, there is one thing that they forget. If you ask any submarine veterans, they will tell you this straight up. You can smell a submariner before you see them. The atmosphere inside the boat is recycled constantly while the air is scrubbed of carbon dioxide and becomes saturated with a chemical called amine. You see, amine is used in CO2 scrubbers, and it is very distinct, with a bad odor. It's described as a mix of old locker room, diesel fuel, and burnt crayons. The smell doesn't just stay in the air, it can get into your pores, your hair, and every piece of clothing you wear. For the person who's going through that, they become nose-blind after a few days underwater, but the moment you open your sea bag back home, the scent fills the room, and it becomes quite disturbing for others. Beyond the chemical smell, there is also the biological reality of 130 men living in a sealed tube with limited hygiene facilities. Showers are a luxury. Not right here, because the ship has to make its own water. Navy showers are mandatory. You basically turn on the water for 3 seconds to get wet, turn it off to lather up, and finally turn it on again for 30 seconds to rinse. Taking a usual shower is like committing a crime against the crew. If the water evaporators go down, showers are the first thing to be cut. There are stories of crews going weeks without a proper shower, relying on baby wipes and deodorant to keep the atmosphere bearable. Breathing. A very distinct experience happens as a submariner too, but before we reveal it, subscribe to our channel if you've enjoyed the video so far. So, how exactly do you keep 130 people alive in water when there's practically no air? You turn the ocean into oxygen. Here we can think of submarines as floating chemical plants. A process called electrolysis happens where the ship's massive electrical generators run current through distilled seawater, ripping the hydrogen atoms away from oxygen. That hydrogen is pumped overboard, and the oxygen is bled into the ship's atmosphere, enabling everyone to breathe. While making oxygen is the easy part, the difficult part is getting rid of the poison that we can easily exhale. Humans constantly produce carbon dioxide, and in a steel tube, that carbon dioxide can build up to toxic levels very quickly, especially if you have hundreds of people to combat this. The air is forced through a scrubber, which is filled with amine, which binds to the CO2 and removes it from the air. However, the air mix is never perfect. If we're talking about older boats or during long patrols, the oxygen levels are often kept slightly lower than sea level to reduce risk. Fire and CO2 levels can go slightly higher. This is quite a pain because it can lead to a constant dull headache and feeling of lethargy that the crew are expected to just push through. In many emergencies, if the reactor fails and power goes out, the crew resorts to oxygen candles that are canisters of iron and sodium chloride that, when ignited, burn at 1,000 degrees and release oxygen. It's one of the scariest last resorts where you light a fire to create the air that you just need to breathe. Starvation. While the pay package is huge, let's not forget the starvation that happens on board. A nuclear submarine can technically sail forever. The reactor fuel lasts for decades. The only limiting factor there is food. When a submariner leaves port for a 6-month deployment, they pack the whole submarine to its gills. There is no Costco in the middle of the Atlantic, so if they forget the catch-up there is no catch-up for 6 months. The logistics here are mind-bending. Every inch of free space is used for food storage. In the first few weeks of patrol, you don't walk on the flooring deck, but you walk on layers of cans, vegetables, and coffee that are covered in plywood as the crew eats their way through the supplies. The floor slowly descends to normal height. First, they go through fresh foods, which include lettuce, tomatoes, milk, eggs, and disappear within the first 2 weeks. Then, everything is frozen, canned, or dehydrated. The ultra-pasteurized milk, which doesn't require any refrigeration and can last for months until opened, has a unique taste that you just have to get used to. Food is also the biggest morale booster on the board. Submariners? I have culinary specialists who are some of the best in the Navy because they just have to be. A bad meal can start a fight in the middle of the ocean. They work miracles with limited ingredients, creating pizza nights on Saturday and Taco Tuesdays to help the crew track the days of the week. But towards the end of a long patrol, things get darker. The only things left are beans and mystery meat that become quite common as the freezer empties out. There is also a legendary story of a boat that ran out of coffee halfway through the patrol. The captain nearly turned the ship around because a caffeine-deprived crew operating a nuclear reactor is a safety hazard in itself. This brings us to the last experience of being a submariner and also the first point that we mentioned, which might have sounded like a joke. Flushing. The toilet is one of the most dangerous systems on a submarine. On a surface ship, gravity does the work, but on a submarine, you are fighting the pressure of the ocean. If you just open a hole to the sea to flush, the water would rush in with force and would sink the whole submarine instantly. Instead, waste is collected in sanitary tanks inside the pressure hull. When these tanks are full, the ship has to go to a specific depth and use high-pressure air to blow the contents overboard. However, the plumbing here involves a complex method in the bathroom, which is called head flushing and involves operating a ball valve. If you do it wrong, or if the valve seal fails, the pressure in the tank can blow the contents backwards into the room. This is known as wearing the waste. History is littered with toilet tragedies. The most famous is the German U-boat during World War II. The captain used a high-tech deep water toilet improperly, opening the wrong valve and flooding the boat with sewage and seawater. The water hit the batteries, creating chlorine gas, and forced the sub to surface right under British bombers. They lost the ship because of a toilet flush. While modern systems are much safer with interlocks and safety valves, every submariner treats the flush level with extreme respect and carefulness. So, with the massive pay package, would you become a submariner? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with the latest technological news.